Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Since the last two streams have not gone particularly well with my insomnia and I've just been really tired at the end of it, I figured I would flip to the other side and stream in early in the morning and then work my way up to falling asleep in the middle of the afternoon, which seems to be what I'm doing anyways for the past few weeks, and see if that really works or not. So yeah, we'll hopefully have a better turn of events this way. I decided to change a setting on my router just in case it is my fault that we've been seeing a lot of dropped frames, and not my ISP's fault. It's possible. I don't really lean towards believing that's the case because it was very much an issue where I've only been seeing problems with Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel to a small extent, and streaming to YouTube. I don't think I actually got around to doing the Duel live, so I may have missed out on 5 gems there. That really doesn't matter too much to me. I have been playing Ni no Kuni, and it is shockingly different this last act. They have effectively no mention of the White Witch, which the name of the subtitle of the game is Wrath of the White Witch. It's Ni no Kuni Wrath of the White Witch. The main characters have never even heard of the White Witch until you're about 75% through with the game. At that fourth quarter of the game, or at least what I'm thinking is the fourth quarter of the game, everything changes. It totally feels like something that would have been DLC or added on, or something that would be in the sequel of the game. It's totally feels like it very possibly was a different group of people that made that section of the game versus other sections of the game, previous sections of the game. And it is kind of a rushed experience, or at least it seems like it's a rushed experience. It's weird because I'm very much at a point where it says prepare for the final battle, but I really don't believe that I am just going to get into the final battle. The game has already once pulled the rug out from under you by introducing the White Witch and introducing the fact that the game wasn't over after you beat the bad guy that they knew about. And it just doesn't, the numbers just don't really add up that this really would be the final battle, unless there is a final battle that ends the narrative story, and then there's just a lot of post-game content that you can play. Either way, it's not a good game. I'd love to wrap it up. I didn't get around to putting in my new video card back into my computer and test that out, but I will say I'm fairly confident that everything else is working as much as I can be, so I'm happy about that. Alright, let's activate this, place this here to do that, and then activate this to add something to my hand, which I guess maybe could be that. Then activate this, go there, and then send this to the graveyard. Activate that to then potentially send this to the graveyard, I guess. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do I have enough to win here? Hmm. What can I summon right now? A 2. They wouldn't let me do anything. Bring another person to the field, I suppose. And see if we can summon a 2 monster that way. The crazy thing here. I think that was gonna be. Should have put that over there. Special summon this. I guess here. And then I don't have enough in this hand. Do that. We have a 2 and a... We could do a 3. That one should have been on the other side. Still... Still not good enough. So my hope would be that this effect here could allow me to do something to get me strong enough. Yeah, other than playing Ni no Kuni though, I really didn't do much this over the weekend, so I don't really have a lot to say as far as that. I do have this increasing dissatisfaction with the amount of work I'm accomplishing, and an itch to get back to playing Binding of Isaac. Let's see. Just get rid of as many of his Blue Eyes White Dragons as possible, so he can't do anything with his graveyard. But yeah, I wanna be done with Ni no Kuni. That was a pretty big failure. It'll probably be at least a couple of years before I try another JRPG. If I do, I'm going to definitely just target something that I'm more interested in the sense of probably a lewd moe anime girl JRPG that is very much more anime instead of a Ghibli-esque, looks like it's kid-friendly Pokemon clone JRPG, which is what Ni no Kuni sells itself as, but it's really not that. It is close to a one-to-one ripoff of like the first Pokemon as far as the number of monsters, but and the attacks and things like that, stats, but everything else around it is definitely not like Pokemon, and none of it's really kid-friendly or good. It definitely feels like Studio Ghibli did a very, very small amount of animation for the game, and then the rest of the animation is 3D animation made by somebody else. They definitely don't have the feel that they had anything to do with the writing, because there barely is any writing in the game. Alright, well, summon that here. Activate this effect. We'll see if we can summon something. I don't think there's any reason to hold back here. Let's do 3,000 and do 6,300. Very rare that we get an opportunity to do massive amounts of damage like that. We haven't had a single drop frame. I'm at gold tier 4. Which is really to say I'm kind of low where I'd like to be, but the season is new. The one thing I didn't accomplish over the weekend also was to catch up on the news, so we're gonna try to burn through the news fairly quickly today. At any point I could get tired again, that's totally a possibility. There's been a little bit of news over the weekend, not a ton. I don't know if I really expect there to be a huge amount of news until like the Summer Games Fest comes out, and even that is seemingly being set up to not be much of an experience. It would be incredibly pointless at this point for, say, Microsoft in particular to come out at a presentation show like Summer Games Fest. Probably not Summer Games Fest specifically, but some E3 replacement type option. It would be rather weird for them to announce that they've got a new Halo in development with Halo Infinite not finished, like 20 new games coming out. If you went down the line and thought about every company that I can name off the top of my head that they have, like if there was like a new announcement with a release date for a new Fallout, a new Skyrim, a new Prey, a new Doom. I think they may have the Dishonored series company too. Like a new Double Fine Brutal Legend type game, or Double Fine Point and Click Adventure, or Double Fine Costume Quest type game, and then Activision Blizzard games also being announced would be odd if they started making announcements for a new new Diablo game, new other kinds of content. Alright. I think that's a good place to start. But yeah, if they had like 12 announcements with release dates and it was all supposed to come out in the next 4 years, that would just be kind of crazy. Like, if anything, even the crazy ambition that came about with like the Marvel Cinematic Universe was insane, and Disney really should hold more of that close to their vest, and instead of announcing things early is really just a trick or a tactic to boost up your stock shares more than anything else. Suppose there's not really a value in placing this and setting it down like it was a trap. And it would be really crazy if any company really did that. Just made giant announcements with release dates in the middle of part shortages, in the middle of questionable futures, interest rates, the Ukraine war still being a factor. It's just, now would be the perfect time for everybody to slow down, stop announcing things until you're really close to release date, and really pull back and think about what you actually should be making and what actually would benefit and benefit the company and make profit. There has been a trend certainly that too many companies are going to go down the route of the original THQ, where they're just making a bunch of licensed products and a bunch of other things. Like, even right now, it would make some sense to just lay off people or reduce their hours, have them work from home, and reset everything. Reset the ridiculously high expectations of game programmers. There is, from what I've heard, a movement of Sonic fans to telling Sega to take another year to work on Sonic Frontiers for that very reason, because they want the game to be good. They don't want Sega to just put something out in the hopes of a cheap cash infusion. Let's see. This is a pretty ugly website by modern standards. ScumVM is asking, please help us with testing in the upcoming ScumVM 2.6.0 release. They specifically are looking for people to play Sanitarium, Hades Challenge, Marvel Comics Spider-Man, The Sinister Six, The 11th Hour, Clandestiny, Tinder Loving Care CD-ROM editions, Uncle Henry's Playlands, Wetlands, and Chewy Escape from F5, which none of these games besides The 11th Hour I've even really heard of. Marvel Comics Spider-Man, The Sinister Six could be any number of games. But boy, I know they don't have the biggest team, ScumVM, and they don't really have a lot of artists on staff, or any artists on staff. But boy, is it time for them to rethink the orange. Like, if they just got rid of the orange on the background and went with a white background, this would be fairly okay. Although their whole website doesn't need to be crazy updated, but there definitely is room for improvements. This website is retro as, with an animated GIF here. It's as retro as the games that the Scum VM actually plays. Alright. Let's go ahead and activate this. That way we'll banish some more cards. The educational website, education.minecraft.net, put out a blog post, explore Ukraine's incredible capital city, Kiev, or Kiev, which arguably, yeah, that'll be educational and historic at this point, because there was just more missiles from Russia attacking Kiev just yesterday or the day before. We definitely have flyover technology at this point, where planes have flown over with cameras and GPS satellites have looked with cameras well enough to know what cities look like for the most part. Particularly governments have that level of detail. It's probably not as detailed as you would like it to be. It'll be definitely more detailed than say the likes of a Minecraft rendering. But yeah, we probably are past a point where if there was even a major world war and all major cities got burnt to the ground, there's still, I suspect, a fairly high chance that we could historically recreate the architecture. The next step in technology certainly will be, can we re-render reality? Can we create traffic patterns and people and where people were and what were they doing? Can we make a massive network of Instagram and Facebook posts to understand even a percentage of what was going on at any specific time? And those are harder projects certainly to pull off, and we'll have a better chance of doing that now than we would 100 years ago. But yeah, I'm sure like if you were to compare, I would suspect, without actually having researched the Nuremberg trials, I would suspect there was a lot of collecting of witnesses' reports and photographs and people's diaries to try to make as detailed and accurate a recreation or record of what happened. And that would probably be one of the closest equivalent efforts of that. But people's memories are faulty and people lie in their diaries, so there would be some hope to get away from that and have more hard data. Although there is also a question of what values data. Like, good programming has to recognize that data needs to be valuable, just not thorough. I could make a program that would make a database with every number from 0 to infinity, theoretically, if they had infinite amount of space. But is that valuable information? No. Whereas a listing of every digit of pi actually might be valuable. I'm cutting this guy's attack in half for no good reason. That was just to try to have another monster in the field. That's not going to work out well for me. I wanted to point out here, Rocksteady Studios said they're delighted they've been given a 2-star accreditation from at Best Companies. Never heard of Best Companies. This year we've been ranked from 13th best technology company in the UK and 39th overall for large companies. Which almost certainly they paid for that rating, and getting 13th best is ridiculously high. Rocksteady is the maker. Am I thinking of a different? Oops, didn't play fast enough. That's alright. I was probably gonna lose anyways. Let's just go to their website. I may be confusing Rocksteady with Rockstar. Regardless, unless it's 2 stars out of a 2-star system, that's really nothing to brag about. And being 13th in anything is nothing to brag about. And frankly, bragging in general is just kind of dumb. It's dumb for any companies to do this. Yeah, Rocksteady is not Rockstar. Rocksteady is a Warner Brothers company, which maybe they are desperately trying to stop themselves from being shuttered due to all of this merging. They made Kill the Justice League, Arkham VR, Arkham Knight, Arkham City, and Arkham Asylum, skipping over, not making the one Arkham City sequel that was made by the other company that people, I think, liked a little bit better. And Arkham Knight was one of the worst games ever. So, while it may be, it might be a great place to work, the quality of their work is questionable. It is also very strange for anybody, any company, to put a floor plan of their studio. Like, and the reason for this is security. Like, unless this is just a made-up floor plan, which that would be stupid, you really wouldn't even show employees this. Let's just do a hypothetical here. And I don't want to get flagged on YouTube, so how am I going to do this? Let's say I am a highly ambitious flower delivery person that wants to get in here and deliver flowers to a specific person, and I don't know where they are. Well, if I was highly ambitious and lacked all morals, it seems like you could come into this meeting room here through the window and then see all of these people, infecting them with a highly full of pollen flower bouquet. And all of these people, at best, fleeing that bouquet, could go down this way towards what I assume might be an exit down here, but maybe not. The welcome area is here, so the proper way to do this would be to come in here and through that. It seems like there's a mocap room with very large mocap room with windows that may not be that big. A bathroom stall with windows. There almost certainly are other doors and exits. There's a single cabinet here. Looks like there's some stairs that lead to different areas. Bathrooms. With each of these bathrooms, you might be able to come in through the ceiling and not be detected until it's too late. Yeah, so if I was a flower delivery person, I could definitely map out a pattern here without going into much detail, much difficulty. This might be storage, or this might be some weird stairs, where I could get the vast majority of people infected with pollen. Yeah, you almost certainly would go for the big group here and then work your way towards the QA team and all of that. Also, since it's QA, you know that this is probably an area where the low-level employees are fairly isolated. And this is kind of an interesting example of how QA people are paid barely anything and just treated as second-class citizens. These angle marks are weird. I don't know what they're supposed to represent. But yeah, it definitely seems like the QA team is brought in from a different side, and they have their own, it seems like, separate bathrooms, and that they are not allowed anywhere near the real programmers and the permanent employees. But yeah, that's dangerous, real dangerous, for a company that's patting itself on the back for being the best place to work. Yep. So many allergy attacks from all that pollen as a highly ambitious flower delivery person. Even if you just had a general map, that'd be all right to have like a general map in the lobby so you can point out where people go. But most businesses don't even go that far. Usually, it is part of the secretary at the front doors, or the security at the front doors' job, is to have a general idea of where somebody should go and give only that very specific information. Here's your visitor's pass. Go through this hallway, through this doorway, take the first left, and go all the way down to the hallway, take the last right. You give them that much information and that much information only. Now, in all fairness, maybe all those records are available publicly, but I don't know if too many people are bothering to look up that information. Alright, moving on with more important video game news. Nintendo will not be at Gamescom this year. That's been confirmed. We had already talked about that from Video Games Chronicles. After 18 months, the PS5 has cleared 20 million units sold. Capcom has acknowledged that the Street Fighter 6 leaks after the roster and footage appears. Quote, "We've seen all the things we weren't supposed to see." Which, I don't know if that really changes too much, to just acknowledge that there were leaks. I still have yet to see real examples where a leak of actual gameplay footage, or of anything really, has hurt a video game significantly. It definitely comes off more like the video game companies want to say it hurt them just so they can control the narrative, and the advertising companies want to say it hurt them so that they can pretend like advertising works and actually is anything more than just a huge waste of time. But the problem is you have this situation where almost all video game announcements, teasers, trailers have some percentage of fraud in them, lies, dishonesty, left open to misinterpretation intentionally. There's just so much of that kind of stuff that is part of the standard operating procedure of video games. A leak showing the truth actually benefits the consumer. arguably, if you're going to believe in that tired phrase caveat emptorum, which is just a kind of an excuse, it really is just a phrase to throw at people to shut down actual logical debate. But if you were really going to believe in buyer beware, then anything anywhere close to deception on the behalf of advertisers should be punished severely, thoroughly, to the point of straight up shutting down companies. And that's pretty much never happened. It's going to be incredibly difficult for somebody to get a hold of leaks of a game and then show that in a terrible light. Even if they got very early versions of the game and the graphics just look terrible and everything's already been changed and fixed, it's just so easy for a video game company to say, yes, that's early alpha footage, but that's not what we nowhere near the state the game is in at this point. And almost every gamer would believe the video game company if they made that claim. Video gamers, unfortunately, are pretty much suckers when it comes to being lied to in advertising. Although, arguably, we're getting better about not falling for that stuff. Let's see. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says classic Nintendo games are set to add ray tracing thanks to a modder. RT64 is a 64 emulator plugin which will add advanced lighting features to Zelda and more. I suspect that won't do much. The idea of rays bouncing off a surface and making reflections loses a lot of its value when you're talking a severely low polygon count. If anything, it might just make the games look weirder or worse. And at a certain point, you're just at cross ends with that concept. There are people that want to play old Nintendo 64 games, want the games to feel like the way they felt when they played them when they were younger. They don't want them to look like remakes or remasters. That's a different audience. That being said, you can probably do some simplistic things to smooth out the polygon and the edges, and it will still feel like the old games, but you can't take the Mario 3D model from Odyssey and put it into Mario 64 and have somebody who is familiar with Mario 64 and not notice that. You can do that for a new audience, and arguably Nintendo themselves should do that for a new audience. For Odysseys, as an example, it is very strange that in a game that has about 800 moons, they didn't bother to try to bring back the content in Mario 64. Because you kind of could have done that. You could have had a team just remake the same challenges, remake the same level design, copy and paste the same levels. What would be interesting if they had done that too is you don't have the same actions in Odyssey, so it could be very difficult, or you'd have to think of a different way to solve some of the puzzles and some of the boss fights and things. But yeah, all Mario Odyssey did was remake the first area of Mario 64 without any of the paintings. And then they re-released a 3-pack for a limited amount of time of the old games just being ported. Nintendo really could rest on its laurels if it embraced actual remastering. This guy is just countering everything I'm trying to do. So that should be more than enough cards. Let's see if that is enough cards. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll have to decide whether we want to get rid of this. I think you're probably best off getting rid of that. And I think I'm better off just leaving everything where it is for now. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says this Instagram model confirms she's the Resident Evil Remake's Ashley. Ella Freya says she's almost cried when she watched the reveal trailer. Okay, I see a resemblance. But also I could see any Instagram person, whether they call themselves a model or not, making this claim without it being confirmed. So I would hope that there was some check that this was true. Capcom says Resident Evil 4 Remake will preserve the essence of the original game, which when they say the essence of anything, they mean very little, while introducing modernized gameplay, which, ooh, that may mean the inventory system doesn't work the same way. A reimagined storyline, so they're totally changing the storyline, and vivid, detailed graphics. Although no audio improvements, apparently. Let's see. This picture of Ashley that was shown is kind of at an angle. So, is there some major differences here? It's hard to tell. It looks like they've made her nose a little bit more downturned, where her nose is a little bit more upturned and bigger. The eyes and the pupils look bigger than hers. Her eyelashes versus her eyebrows are different colors, which that may be the case in... Man, take your eye away for a second and then all this happens. Well, this could be bad. I think this is bad. I'd say her jawline, particularly in this area, seems to be maybe a little bit sharper, although not by much. The lips, maybe a little bit less pronounced in the top of the lips there, but not a major change there. Yeah, I would kind of assume that this was pretty much a 3D face scan, and then they barely did anything to it. I think in my mind, in my memory, Ashley didn't have as chubby cheeks, and like she really doesn't have chubby cheeks, and she doesn't really have chubby cheeks, but I feel like there was just no fat there at all in the original animation versions of that, because of course those proportions would be fairly inaccurate. It does certainly feel like they are trying to depict her, and that they're going to depict her as being younger instead of being this 18-year-old European clubbing daughter of the president. It does also seem like she'll probably dressed maybe a little bit more conservatively, but really not seeing too much. And if the biggest complaint that's made about the Resident Evil 4 remake is that they went woke and made Ashley less of a object targeted for some dumb sex jokes, then we're probably in a good position. It is going to be weird, certainly, if you start to think about very specific sequences in Resident Evil 4, because that is a game that also just goes on forever. If those sequences are drastically changed or just completely missing, that would be strange. There is a point also to point out that since I haven't gotten around to playing any of the remakes of Resident Evil, I don't know if there's really any sequences in the RE1 or RE2 remake, particularly the RE2 remake, because that's where I think they started to really change things. I don't know if there was really major sequences in RE2 that didn't get played out in some way in the RE2 remake that people missed. If there was content people missed, it was content that not that many people missed, because there was no big uproar about it. On the other hand, you could also complain, certainly, if RE4 gets remade and it feels like just another lazy attempt to resell Resident Evil 4, which they really can't do that anymore. But they need to give us new content, so there needs to be new levels and areas. It is going to be a delicate balance between, I expect there to be that village area at the beginning with the guy with the chainsaw, but I also kind of expect that village to be 2-3 times bigger, and perhaps the AI and actions that the zombies do, I know they're technically Ganados, but whatever, that should be potentially improved too. And yeah, there definitely are some sections of Resident Evil 4 that very few people, I think, would miss. Like the couple of painting puzzles people probably wouldn't care if that disappeared. The sewer section, that if that was drastically changed, I don't think people would care. Just walking from point A to point B in some locations, I don't think people would particularly care if a narrow hallway with just 3 zombies in it turned into a more open world, open field area that had 5 to 10 zombies in it. I think the narrowness in particular is the thing that might kill the Resident Evil 4 remakes more than anything, because I kind of did get the feeling that the RE2 and the RE3 remakes were somewhat narrow in that there were just alleyways you would go through, and then there would be a street, but it would be blocked off in several different directions, and there really would just be 1 or 2 exits of that street. That it definitely was the case in the RE6. They also paint themselves in the corner now because they basically need to do something completely different as far as RE5, or not touch RE5, and same is true for RE6. Although RE5 I think is a little bit better of a game and probably would deserve a remake of some sort. Unless it was a case that they wanted to just see if the same complaints would come back up. I guess that would be the question, certainly, is if they remake. When RE5 came out, people complained about it being set in Africa, and most of the characters at the beginning of that game, at least, being African. And Chris Redfield being the main character, being either looked upon or somewhat displayed as a white savior coming to Africa to save the day, or being displayed as a bad white guy shooting a bunch of African zombies. And I think Capcom took those complaints, which weren't probably legitimate even when they originally came out, far too much to heart. And I wouldn't be surprised if they still are sore about unfair complaints like that. And so if they were to make an RE5 remake, it might just be a totally different game, but I don't know how it could be a totally different game. And RE4 might be the point to try to make it a different game. I guess what you might try to do is just go the straight up alternate reality route and say that there is a in RE4 there's just going to be a point where they say, yes, the story is going in a completely different direction, and because it's going in a completely different direction, RE5 and RE6 cannot possibly happen the way it happens. And that probably would be something along the lines of killing Chris Redfield, or eliminating the character Wesker. Yeah. And that probably would be the way to do it. Is I don't know if we've seen Wesker in any of the remakes at all, since I haven't played those games. So if Agent Wesker is just out of the picture, then it's an alternate reality. Then Umbrella Corp is being run by somebody else, and that somebody else is doing something in a very different way. At that point, then you can have a Resident Evil 5 game that more tries to connect to Resident Evil 7 and then continue down that path with a Resident Evil 6 game to connect to Resident Evil 7. Yeah, I don't think you can actually kill Chris Redfield because he shows up in Resident Evil 7 DLC. But maybe you could kill Wesker. Or just have a different Wesker with a different plan, different actions, different attitude. Less cheesy. Let's see, moving on to news. Video Games Chronicle says Rare's developers are still playing an Xbox's unannounced GoldenEye 007 port. GoldenEye 007 at this point really is just the Mother 3 of... It really is just the Mother 3 of a new generation. There's really no way that it's going to be anything that people will spend a lot of time with. Which certainly I am feeling some of that personally. I haven't gotten back to doing anything with the Nintendo Switch. And probably shouldn't. Right. 1, 2, 3. With that. See if that lets me summon something. Go ahead and send that to the graveyard. I suppose it would be interesting if it turned out that GoldenEye 007 came out and it just signaled an end of an era, as it were. The last game to prove that just player versus player first person shooting is completely stagnant and not really the hotness like it has been for decades. The people that want to play just a player versus player first person shooter are playing Counter-Strike Go and maybe a couple other games. Halo, maybe. Call of Duty, maybe. But that's it for the gamer bros that tend to play those types of games. And you can't bring back any or increase any enthusiasm around that style of game, particularly around nostalgia for a very old version of that game. I'd be much more interested in seeing the Perfect Dark remakes and see what they try to do. Moving on, the Video Games Chronicle says fans calling Sega to delay Sonic Frontiers following gameplay reveal, so they're not enthusiastic about it. Which, yeah, I saw some rings in some of the footage I watched, and they're arguably not quite shiny enough to my style, to my desire, but it was confusing to try to imagine how Sonic Frontiers, as far as the footage I've seen, would play or feel like a Sonic game. Let's see. We could discard a card to start with. I suppose that's as safe of a move as anything. This guy's gonna take forever. Video Games Chronicle says the first Call of Duty Warzone mobile screenshots have appeared online, which I guess anybody can check that out if you're interested. Let's see. Take that. Activate this effect. Tossing this one this time. Gotta make sure you toss the right ones, because these effects only activate once per turn. I do feel like I'm getting better and better with this deck, even finding a few new tricks in it. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if they update the lineup of cards fairly soon, and then everything changes. Let's see. Video Games Chronicles says Toys for Bob could be working on a new Crash Bandicoot. It's claimed the studio was believed to be hiring for a non-Call of Duty project last year. Yeah, but that's believable, although I would also say I don't really 100% believe that there's been a lot of success with the Crash Bandicoot remasters and re-releases and all of that. It does kind of come off feeling like Crash Bandicoot as a concept, as a 3D platformer in a different design, would have to really rethink things as much as Sonic Frontiers is rethinking things. It feels like there should have been a natural transition for Crash Bandicoot to make a Mario 64 clone with his spinning and running abilities, which spinning and running abilities is the exact same as Sonic, but that didn't happen when it should have happened, and doing it now would not get you that nostalgia kick. It would be a risk, and I'm not sure anybody's willing to take risks anymore. Let's see. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says Sega producer says the high costs are preventing a Dreamcast or Saturn mini console. It's not that we didn't think about that direction, is the exact quote. And instead they came out with a maybe Japanese only Sega CD, I think is what you would call it in the West. Like the high cost are the fact that they wanted to use the exact same components, which at a certain level, that is also admitting that the previous Sega Mini things that they had made did not outsell their stock of ordered components. So it is very possible what happened is the original Sega Minis were on shelves. They weren't selling. I don't know if they really do this so much in Japan, but they do it in the US. Because they weren't selling, they were sent back for credit or partial refund, or maybe even full refund from the shopkeepers back to Sega themselves. So then Sega had all of this hardware, and the circuit boards are almost certainly going to be the same. Of course, it doesn't have to go down like that. It could also be a case where they ordered 2,000 of those boards, and they were only delivered at first 1,000 of them, and by the time they got the second 1,000 of the boards, they said, "Oh well, we're no longer going to promote the old ones and try and do a second run. Let's use those boards for something else instead." Could be any number of scenarios. But yeah, they need more RAM, better graphics cards, better CPUs if they were going to emulate Dreamcast or Saturn. I've seen two stories like this with two different numbers now, but Video Games Chronicle says maxing out a Diablo Immortal character could reportedly cost up to $110,000. The game's highest tier currency appears to only be available via loot boxes. I saw another one said that it might be $250,000. So yeah, any thought I think at this point of me even testing out Diablo Immortal, I think is out the window. Like, the reception here is just so incredibly negative that I don't think you'll have enough of a player base, and I don't think it'll have enough people to support it, particularly if it is all trying to have a player base that is also full of whales buying microtransactions and loot boxes. That is funny though, because there is definitely an alternate universe where a good mobile Diablo game was released, and I would have considered playing it. Honestly, I could see myself, if I wasn't having a decent time with Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, I could see myself potentially jumping off playing collectible card games totally, and instead playing something that is more like Diablo, if it's a World of Warcraft style Diablo that can just be played forever. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle has yet another article. GoldenEye HD finally looks set for release after achievements appear on Xbox. This is definitely catching them a lot of views because they're putting out repetitive articles. GameDeveloper.net also seems to be getting back into that bad habit of just reposting on Twitter. And I suppose it is sufficient to say that, at least at the moment, nothing has changed with Twitter. Elon Musk not really finalized the purchase of Twitter or making any big changes. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of stalling and putting it off until at least after the midterm elections in the United States, and at that point I wouldn't be surprised if Elon Musk loses interest. there's definitely a danger that Elon Musk decides to go into politics. Yeah, you never know. And that would be crazy to say the least. Video Games Chronicle says another Obsidian developer has suggested the studio may show one of its new games soon. The designer Josh Schloyer has previously teased that the studio could appear at the Xbox Bethesda showcase this week. It does seem like this week will be the week in which we start to see some games announced, but I think this could be the smallest amount of announcements in a long time, even considering the pandemic and E3 just kind of consistently getting worse. Let's see. Diablo Immortal faces a backlash as Metacritic user score drops to Blizzard's third lowest ever. Loot boxes and a PvP mode ruined by pay to win are among the top complaints from players. Which, if it's the third lowest ever, then I guess my question is, what is the... Did I read that line? It's the third lowest ever. What are the two games that are worse than that? Let's see. Set. Activate. I could discard one card and then destroy this. Yeah, let's not do that though. Because I still wouldn't get that to the field. Yeah, the only two games worse were Warcraft 3 Reforged, which, man, people hated that, and World of Warcraft Classic Burning Crusade Classic, both of which were released in recent years, 2020 and 2021. In a lot of ways, this points out that Microsoft is buying Activision Blizzard and getting potentially a very bad deal for it. You've got a ton of toxic management that all needs to be fired. I mean, really, just sweeping clean the board on all of that for the most part. You've got a bunch of employees who haven't jumped ship, so they probably weren't the good employees, particularly at this point, because there's just been so much negativity. Any good employee would have jumped ship. Yep. So all they're buying is the rights to some games that were very popular in the 90s, and then they're going to have to rethink everything. I don't think Microsoft and Major Nelson in particular wants to look like the bad guy in these acquisitions, but it very well may be it may be better in the long run if day one of the acquisition being finished for Major Nelson to simply lay off all the management, restructure everything, make everybody re-interview for their jobs, set up a helpline, a complaint line of where people can tattle on other people for doing things before they were acquired, as far as bad coworkers and bad employees. But honestly, I could see you just clearing the board completely, firing all employees from Activision Blizzard and say, hey, we've got these games, we're going to lay off everybody, we're going to cancel all projects in development, and we're starting over from scratch with handing over these licenses to the other teams and studios we already have established. Like, just hand over Diablo to Bethesda, and Skyrim, Elder Scrolls games now are Diablo games, are very similar on the same engine, look about the same, just slightly different storylines. Let's see. Activate this. Although, in reality, you probably wouldn't just lay off everybody, because you would start from that thought, and then you would work your way towards a more reasonable thought. You'd say, World of Warcraft is still making some money, so let's not immediately get rid of World of Warcraft support staff, at least. And people are still paying for World of Warcraft, so let's not just cancel future projects in World of Warcraft. You'd say Overwatch and Hearthstone still probably should have some support. And as such, it might make a lot of sense to make those maintenance mode games still be a thing. You might cancel something like an Overwatch 2 or any major ambitious improvement on World of Warcraft. I could see also very much having to agonize over trying to figure out what, if anything, could bring back your audience as far as Activision Blizzard titles. It'd be very hard to convince me, for instance, that to go back and play Hearthstone, and that has very little to do with even Activision Blizzard. I was just tired of playing Hearthstone after a while. The only thing that really did push me out the door was their pro-China stance, which that disappeared. Well, I think we'll just do this. We'll just go ahead and activate this to move that from his hand. So the question is, will I have this guy quagmired long enough, or will he be able to do something else? In a lot of ways, getting rid of the Activision Blizzard name would make a lot of sense too. I heavily suspect we'll see in the first 2 years a renaming of those studios, breaking them up, getting rid of Activision, getting rid of Blizzard as a title, heavily focusing on Diablo, Warcraft, Overwatch, Hearthstone, each of those titles being the things to focus on. And they probably won't rename things Hearthstone Studio or something like that, but they'll probably give them fairly generic names. Right. Try again. This one, and this one. Let's hope that this isn't anything. Let's see. Moving on, Forza Horizon 5 has reached 20 million players, which that sounds like a big number. Jeff Keighley says Summer Games Fest will be primarily focused on announced games, so don't expect a lot of new game announcements. If anything, this might be a first instance of the Summer Games Fest having a bit of a pitfall. Where up until this point, it's been climbing in esteem. So this is going to try and counter something this does. Monster with special summon. Bring it back. Bring it back. $16, $17. See if this does something. Trying just about everything. Let's see. Guess we'll take this one. Take that one. Let's see. Tetsuya Mizuguchi is very interested in developing a PSVR 2 game. The Tetris Effect designer previously told VGC this team were targeting next-gen platforms. I don't think you really can consider PSVR 2 a next-gen platform. It is kind of its own unique platform system. Unless it's just going to come with every PlayStation 6. It wouldn't be insane, it would be very weird, but if the PlayStation 6, something named the PlayStation 6, was a console that was 100% VR compatible, and basically required you to have the VR headset nearby at all times, it'd be interesting. I don't know if a lot of people would buy it, but it would let you potentially then create a situation where most people will just focus on getting the PlayStation 5 and That went poorly. That went real poorly. I thought this would just be the culmination of the characters on his side of the field. Well, I just handed him victory. Let's go back to the main menu and just check on what the daily quests were, because I really wasn't paying attention when I looked at them. Yeah, you could buy yourself time by calling the next number console PlayStation 6 and then requiring VR and then just knowing it won't really succeed. It would almost be like the reverse of what the Virtual Boy did, where it was rushed out because they kind of didn't want it to compete with the Nintendo 64 or the 2DS or something. I don't think the 2DS. It wouldn't have been the 2DS now. I'm just gonna let this Duel Live play, and then I think we'll cover some news in a faster speed. My Video Games Chronicle says Xbox has confirmed an extended showcase on June 14th with new trailers and deeper looks, which definitely does not imply new games. And then Square Enix says that Crystal Dynamics and Eidos Cell won't be invested in NFTs and blockchain. It will instead be used to strengthen the company's core games businesses. Although that seems almost like that is a direct opposite statement to what they were hinting at before. But they definitely got some pushback when they said, well, we want to now buy new companies and we want to focus on blockchain and NFT projects. That being said, also there's a difference between strengthening the company's core games business and even acquiring other Japanese companies. At a certain level, it does just feel like Square Enix doesn't know what they're doing. Yep. So, yeah. I will leave it at that. And then let's quickly burn through some of the games that came out over the weekend. Among the Skies here looks like nothing. Space Beast Terror Fright looks a little too dark. It kind of feels like it's a clone of Metroid Prime because of the heads-up display visors. It's kind of interesting. Nobody else ever really embraced that concept. Although, in all fairness, the visors were incredibly distracting in Metroid Prime and not very useful. I think I'd say no to this because it's mostly seems to be focused around multiplayer. It is rated very, very positively, so, and it, in all fairness, does not look terrible. Just a little dark screenshotty. The heads-up display looks pretty bad, but not awful. Here we have an adult game. This came out on the 3rd, so this would have been later on Friday, I suppose, or early on Saturday. Lust and Magic Chrysalia in a Flower Basket. We don't see a lot of games that have words like lust in the title, but Lust for Darkness definitely exists. Let me make sure all these screenshots are YouTube family friendly. I think they are. Yeah. You can see that this game is mixed reviewed, tagged with nudity and not safe for work things. More than likely there's a patch that would take a character like this and make them topless, maybe even bottomless. But also it does just look like an RPG Maker game. Doesn't seem like there's a nude patch or anything here, so doesn't actually seem like it has nudity or anything, so this may be deceptive, and that may very well be the case, that it's just straight up lying and that's why it's mixed reviewed. It's because it's just not delivering. It also doesn't really feel like it supports English too well. That would be my guess. Regardless, it still looks like an RPG Maker game, so there's nothing there. Hacker Man just looks like an asset flip game of no interest. Inlander's First Encounter is a top-down twin-stick shooter. I'll give this a follow. Might be something to this. Seems like it's a card game mixed with an action RPG, like a Mega Man Battle.net. No, not Battle Network game clone. Yeah. I do question if I've already gotten like daily logins and I could do a solo mode duel for 40 gold at any point. Like, that does put you in a weird position where there isn't a ton of stuff to do. Just try and work your way up the ranked. And I probably won't be able to get up rank if I'm not having the lucky network troubles. Which I haven't seen network troubles today, so maybe it was the setting I changed, maybe not. You never know. Here we have something called Kyra's Ascent. Third-person combat game with high mobility, it says. Might be something to this, but also there might be nothing to it. Which is to say, absolutely nothing. Regardless, I'll put it on the follow list. I have a game here called Revived Forest, which just looks like a platformer. I can dismiss that. Honestly, if I was trying for some insane reason to get back to doing 3 to 4 hour streams, I could slow down a little bit when looking at these games. But I'm not trying to do that. If anything, I want these streams to be as short as possible, particularly when I see the average watch time of a lot of these streams is barely a few minutes. There's definitely people that just get bored and jump off. And there's certainly something there I don't understand as far as YouTube viewers and the algorithm and all of that, because it feels like if I'm supposed to get the message that people don't like the screen peek when I come over here and look at games, if they don't like the video game news part of it, I don't know how to get that message or get the message that they don't like the Yu-Gi-Oh part of it. It could be one or the other, or both, or the combination of both. But all I'm told is like watch time, and suppose I could go into exact details of the exact second that most people drop off, but the numbers are also so small as far as views. Any message I take away from that is like one individual person's input, which is not really a big enough sample size to be certain of anything. Part of the reason, now that I think about it and remember that I didn't accomplish as much as I should have this weekend, is because I did distract myself trying to see if my code for implementing screen time could could be accomplished on, well, pretty much any Linux-based firewall router, but specifically DDWRT. As I'm desperately trying to get a couple of Raspberry Pi 4s to set up Pi-hole and some other things with Pi-hole to work. And as I was researching that as much as I can, and I really can't go much further because I need the hardware and I need to really just start messing with the code, I did come across an interesting command in Linux called IW that would let me find the connection time of wireless devices. But after messing with it for several hours, I took a step back and reevaluated, and I realized that you still run into the same problem. Connection time is just connection time. It does not mean how long people are actually putting their face in front of a screen. And there's on something, whether it's a Nintendo Switch or a cell phone or a computer, there's just always something that's going to be using a little bit of bandwidth. So if you could monitor the bandwidth particularly and say, I see that the internet is actually actively being used, which also that doesn't really cover screen time when people are not using the internet. Like, it's pretty easy to go in airplane mode and watch a downloaded video, and that would be hard to count on the end of a Wi-Fi router. So yeah, the connected time would stay the same because you don't want to disconnect the device when the screen time is used up. If they were allowed to use like an hour, you want to disconnect the device at an hour, because if it's a cell phone, it'll just go over the mobile data at that point, or it'll just reconnect and your connection time will be back to the same. You could do definitely bandwidth limitations, but you can't really do that with DDWRT, and or at least it doesn't seem like there's an easy way to do that, to monitor the bandwidth used per device. Even if you could do it per device, that still creates a scenario where a kid could fairly quickly realize, oh, I get an hour of screen time on this cell phone, and the Nintendo Switch then is another hour, and then I can go find another device and that'll give me another hour. So none of it just works. And it kind of is a case where there are better solutions anyways. Microsoft for Windows has a family screen time element. The Apple has their own app, and Google has their own app. There's a Linux app called Activity Watch, and so that at best you probably don't want to use Activity Watch, and you'd be better off using the Microsoft app for Windows and the Apple app for iPhones and MacBooks, and the Google app for Google Android stuff. How many things do we have in the field? Graveyard. Summon this. Summon this. Activate this effect. Ooh, this. That wasn't useful. But yeah, I definitely wasted a lot of time around that. Time I shouldn't have wasted. I still have several projects that are backburnered, and whenever Amazon Prime Day happens, the Tableau over-the-air DVR is going to fairly quickly stop offering the commercial skip feature for new devices, which, yeah, definitely makes me think that they are going to get rid of commercial skip, which in all fairness doesn't work great. Anyways, it works pretty good on the main channels, ABC, CBS, Fox, NBC, but once you start to get more local channels, its detection can be a little bit iffy sometimes, and that definitely paints a bit of a middle ground. Like the Tableau as an over-the-air DVR may not be the device to stick with, because who knows, the company could very much go fly-by-night and just disappear, and it is a very useless device if you're not getting the channel guide data and the extended service, which is $60 a year or $180 for a lifetime. Or at least it's going to cost me $180 for a lifetime license, which I think I will pretty much just be forced to spend that much. It's still incredibly cheaper than paying for cable TV, but I'm also doing that at the moment, so I haven't saved anything from it at all. In fact, I've spent a lot on getting antennas and hardware and repeaters and amplifiers. But yeah, that I don't know what to really say about that, and it doesn't have anything to do with video games, but I suppose I should just warn people, if you were ever wanting an over-the-air DVR, you might consider the Tableau now, and you might want to get it quick, so you can get a lifetime support with commercial skip, which commercial skip I think will go away for all devices eventually, even people with the lifetime license. They promise new features, but I'm not sure I really believe them that they're going to actually deliver on new amazing features. They may deliver new features. In the United States, the over-the-air signal ATS-3 is slowly being adopted, and in about 5 years it might be a case where if you have a TV that's getting digital signals, they might need a new adapter, or you might need to buy a new TV. Although I suspect it won't move that fast. Really, it tends to get delayed and delayed and delayed. Having recently bought a 4K TV, I've found the 4K part of that to be pretty useless so far. Moving on back to games that came out on Steam, we have one here called Idle Galaxy, which just looks like an idle game. We have one here that's called NMDC, which does not look impressive. We have a game called The Last City, which looks like it's a base building, zombie, probably tower defense game. Yeah, I don't think the visuals are quite good enough here to put this on the fall list. Though, the concept might have made some sense, like a Wild Western game where you're defending this isolated city from zombies. It's rather annoying that every time this guy does something, his little main character makes noise, and that there's no way to mute that. Hearthstone had all these nice little features where you could emote to people and mute them, and all that got tossed away. No. I think I'm gonna lose here. Unless I had something I could activate in the graveyard. Here we have a game on Steam called The Forest Prison, which looks like it is a zombie shooter, probably an asset flip zombie shooter that has gone in a slightly different direction by having more of a maze-like environment. You have this grotesque zombie head. They're calling it a puzzle game. It's not really the worst idea, so I'm gonna give it a follow. Like, when you think about Portal, where you're running around and gunning with portals and puzzling that way, if Portal, instead of having turrets, had zombies, it would be a bit more generic, but it would still work as a concept. And certainly that feels like it's trying to do something more than just your standard zombie shooter. Here we have a game called Fung Guys, which doesn't look like anything of interest. It's an online multiplayer game focused also. We have a game called Super Duck, which feels like it's kind of a twist on a Lemmings game. But I don't think there's quite enough visual polish here that would make me want to play this. In all fairness, if you tried to get me to play a Lemmings game anyways, I'd still probably say no to wanting to play that. And even if you made like a full-on reboot, remake of the Lemmings series, it's probably going to be too simplistic of a gameplay concept, and the visuals probably couldn't look good enough to entrance me. Here we have a game called Undarkened, which doesn't look like it's visually polished enough, and it looks like it's just a survival asset flip game. Here we have a game called Panzer Girls. Here you can see an anime girl, but then it seems like they're fighting dragons in mobile suit mechs. This is not from publisher or developer that I would suspect is in any way associated with the Panzer Girls anime, whatever the actual name of that is. where it was anime girls in tanks. So I assume it's just a ripoff, and even if it isn't a ripoff, it's still not good looking. Here we have Stickman Synthwave, which looks like a very much frustration platforming game. Here we have Crazy Shark, which looks like it might be a Feeding Frenzy type clone. Doesn't look like there's enough variety here, and blue on blue background definitely is not the smartest choice. Here we have Space Mole May, which looks like nothing of interest. Although in all fairness, if you were to come out with a new Asteroids clone arcade type game, it would look so simplistic that I would dismiss it immediately. Here we have a game called Prototype Paradise Lost, which looks like it's anime characters in kind of an asset flip game, car shooting game. There's not a lot of Japanese car shooting games out of though. They tend to just go straight to the idea of a tank, which does make sense because there are very few cars in the real world that have turrets on the top of them. There's plenty of tanks that have turrets on the top of them. Let's see. Do you have any other Zodiac things? Yes, I do. So you summon this, activate it. You toss this one, I guess. You activate this effect, and you toss this one. Now we've got two characters at the moment. You then summon this. Which in this case, his ability to destroy anything is not useful. So we'll jump over to something else. And that one can't be used. So we'll jump over to something else. And this isn't all just a waste time. This is legitimately getting cards into the this is actually getting cards into the graveyard. I guess if that had been special summoned, that might do something. Now, this effect let me bring back this. And yeah, that's good enough for now. I could power up this by pulling the other one out of the graveyard. I could special summon using this and this, and then have enough in the graveyard to use this ability. Yeah, we still have a lot of games on Steam, so we're gonna have to burn through a lot more of these, unfortunately. Smash Crates doesn't look interesting. Stonkers doesn't look interesting. That looks really bad. Want to keep an eye out to see if there's multiple games being released by that developer. BCI VR Horror doesn't look visually polished quite enough. Looks like it's just an on-rails VR horror experience. Falling Elevator. How does this play? Oh, you have to brake so it doesn't collide. As it falls, but apparently you can't fully stop. You have to slow your descent until you get to the end. That definitely feels like something that should be more of a mobile game than something on Steam. And it definitely looks like a mobile game. So yeah, no the Falling Elevator. We have For the Fatherland, which sounds like you're playing as the Germans, and visually it doesn't look very polished. It's tagged as a tower defense game, and I'm willing to believe it. We have a game called Until the Night, which seems to be a North Pole management simulator game that's not visually polished. Major pop-in, even in their trailer. This guy's doing a lot of stuff. Yeah, we have a game called Plunger Boys, which doesn't look like much of anything. We have Elder Scrolls Online High Isle, and this is from Bethesda. And it doesn't seem like it does require Elder Scrolls Online. So $50, not eligible for a refund. Interesting, I haven't seen that very often. Or $40 to upgrade. Yeah, that does seem like that's asking a lot. Visuals here don't look terrible, but I don't know if that's what the game really looks like in day-to-day playing. There is definitely a point, I think, that deserves to be made. As far as Microsoft hasn't really ever embraced the monetization model of a online MMO service. Like they've never really had anything like that. So I could see them potentially deciding that they don't like the way Elder Scrolls Online is monetized. I don't know if they can really do anything to adjust for that without just abandoning Elder Scrolls Online. And at a certain point, yeah, if they did abandon Elder Scrolls Online, which is where Bethesda's making a lot of money, then they could pretend like that abandonment is a good thing, because it means that team would start focusing on making the next Elder Scrolls game. Yeah, I'm starting to yawn now, and we have been going for 2 hours, so I need to hurry up. We have a game called Run Build Pew, which kind of looks like an FTL clone, but doesn't feel like it has the storyline of FTL. It looks like it's more of a top-down shooter where you can construct your ship. Here we have My Little Dictator visual novel. It would be interesting if all of a sudden we start to see more leniency on these occasional anime Nazi games, for lack of a better term. Notice they're not doing the swastika or anything like that, but the implication is definitely there. Remember, the Japanese sided with the Nazis in World War II and still really do not want to admit to themselves that that was a mistake. And frankly, that's not even their biggest problem. They don't want to admit to a lot of things they did during the war. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of the things that they're accused of doing that they didn't quite do, or didn't do quite in the way that it's described. The victors always make history, or write the history, as it were. But there definitely is this fascination with making anime dictators, which it's a funny idea. Certainly, it's frankly more shocking that there isn't a game out there or a TV show or a movie with a baby Hitler, that not a Hitler as a baby going back in time and killing him, which that's been done to death as a cliche, but the idea of a baby in diapers acting as the leader of Nazi Germany and calling all the shots. That would be comedic, and I haven't ever even seen anybody make a joke skit about that. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Dune Strider, which this might be a student project. Rydo University of Applied Science. So I'll give it a follow, just because I think it might be a student project, but that's basically all it deserves, and it doesn't really deserve that. Here's a weird thing. Maida's Adventure, a tilt-shifted, isometric almost view of what would otherwise be a top-down Sokoban box-pushing game, for lack of a better term. I gotta actually play here. All the way down to 0. Let's see. Moving on, Gametsu has an article here. Session Skate Sim launches September 22nd. Which there have been several skate simulating games that would have liked to see succeed and then didn't succeed, so let's see. I don't think this would counter it, but I don't have anything else to do, so let's just destroy that. Let's see. Kamiwaza, Way of the Thief, launches October 13th in Japan, according to Gametsu. Only really have about 10 articles. Almost would lean on running the macro again just to see if there's anything new that happened in the past couple hours, but I don't think I'll do that. Acquire has announced a strategy RPG adventure called Academia: The Fractured Continent for PS4, Switch, and PC, which is set in the world of Class of Heroes, not Clash of Heroes. And it has kind of a flat cardboardy cutout of it. I don't know what Class of Heroes is. It sounds like it's a mobile game knockoff of, or trying to create name confusion around Clash of Heroes. Interesting that the Japanese one is not as blurry as the English one. Guess it was just a matter of the thumbnail. Both seem like they're both fairly blurred using my blurring function. Let's see. Class of Heroes 2 Remaster is announced for PS4 and Switch, now in development. So this must have been a game, a dungeon RPG. It first launched on the PSP in 2009. So I guess that explains why I don't recognize it. It's very possibly never came to the West. And even if it did, it would have been a PSP game, and I wouldn't have heard about it then anyways. Let's see if we can save the day. Three cards. 1, 2, 3. And then summon this. Okay. Banish this. And get rid of that. That may mean this he can't attack, so it may have been better to attack. I'm having to work really hard here to try and win. Oh, well, that went badly. That was not what I intended to do. Moving on, Gematsu has an article here. Labyrinth of Zangetsu launches September 29th in Japan. Apparently it's a turn-based RPG, dungeon RPG. Akiba's Trip, Undead and Undressed DLC Katie Route has been announced, and the sales have topped 600,000. Undead and Undressed is, I think, the remake of the first game in the series, or remaster of the first game in the series. If not, it's the third game in the series, and the third game hasn't come to the West, or it has come to the West and I've totally missed it. Yeah, I probably would be enjoying Akiba's Strip a lot more than they call it Akiba's Strip 2. So maybe it's a remaster of the second game. 600,000 sales is a pretty big number for such a niche game. Yes, this is, I think, the second game in the series. I probably shouldn't show you some of this, because the whole fighting mechanic in Akiba's Strip is that you're stripping off the clothes of these energy vampires or fashion vampires that gain power based on the clothing they're wearing. But I don't think it actually gets that explicit either. I don't think it ever goes beyond just showing people in pretty tame underwear. Or standard underwear. Maybe not that tame. Moving on, Lost Ruins for the PS4, Xbox One, Switch launches June 6th. Which, that one looks like it might be interesting. And then they have this week's Japanese game releases, The Quarry, Mario Strikers Battle League, and more. Digital only, there's a lot of games. Physical, it's Demon Slayer, the Hinakami Chronicles for Switch, Clap, whatever that is, Mario Strikers, and The Quarry. 4 physical games. A lot more digital games. A free-to-play RPG, Kimono Friends 3, is now available for the PS4 in Japan. It was previously only available for iOS, Android, and PC. The Kimono Friends series, I don't know if it's particularly still super popular as an anime. It's still probably pretty cutesy, and I imagine people that were enthralled with it before are probably still somewhat enthralled with it. But I wouldn't expect it to be a huge seller or one that would get a lot of new games. It coming to PS4 what feels like a real long time after it came to Android and iOS, I think is yet another indication of a lack of enthusiasm for games to be on the PS4 even, let alone the PS5. I'm gonna run out of hard drive space here in a second. I have apparently approximately 4 hours, but that's not good. The Gematsu says the Xbox Games Showcase is an extended set for June 14th. There will be creator interviews, deeper looks at Xbox and Bethesda games, and trailers. Yeah, at a certain point here, I might as well just like surrender. Because I don't think there's anything that can be done here. Like if I was to turn this into this. Might let me get one more thing in the graveyard, but I don't think I can get one more thing on the field. I just don't think I even have the characters I need. 2 level 12 monsters. Yeah, if I send that to the graveyard, and then activate its ability. And then I send this to the hand, and then activate this ability. Just send that to the graveyard. Then I activate this ability for 600. Best case scenario is I could have brought out this. And then from that, I could have tried to bring out something like this. And from that, I can't do anything else. Alright, so now we've got some fall. Let's clean up. We have one called Sheeran the Wanderer, the Tower of Fortune, and the Disc of Fate, which mostly positive, but it also does look like just an old school RPG. They're calling it a roguelike. I don't think even if it is a roguelike, though, that works for me. And it's from Spike Chunsoft. Came out in 2020. It's not that big of a deal. If I was going to just try and play like every Spike Chunsoft game, maybe I would come back and consider that, but also I don't know why I would do that. There's a lot of games here that it would be no, and then some big games like the Steins Gate series that I totally should play, and the Danganronpa series, which I should continue to play, and I should finish Zero Escape, Zero Time Dilemma. Still haven't gotten around to buying Danganronpa 2. Let's see. Here we have a game from 2021 called Shipwreck Escape, which doesn't look terrible, but it has no relevancy with 3 reviews. And I suspect that probably means there isn't that much of gameplay here. Let's see what the reviews say. Recommended, recommended, recommended. So either I have to make an exception and say, alright, this might be a hidden gem, so I'll put it on the wish list, or I need to just say it is a irrelevant game. I think I'll be generous and put it on the wish list, but at some point I'll probably do a wish list cleanup and wonder why that's on the wish list. Next we have Ship Graveyard that has you chopping up a ship for components and resources. definitely isn't something that I think I can relate to. The idea of tearing apart a ship. I think something like Raft here would make a lot more sense. But I guess I'm in a generous mood, so I'm going to put this on the wish list too. Like, if Raft ever came out of early access, I would just play Raft, and then in that you would be building a ship and dismantling a ship anyways. We have a beat 'em up called Shing. It looks good enough. It's out of early access. I don't want to really agonize over a lot of these. Put that on the wish list too. Odd, 3 things on the wish list. Add to the wish list. Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne HD Remaster. It's rated very positively. I don't think I'd ever actually get around to playing the Shin Megami Tensei series though. It would make a lot more sense, I think, to play the Persona series. In a lot of ways, even though they don't really emphasize it, this is a creature collector game in the same way as Ni no Kuni or Pokemon is. And so there would be a lot of grinding around that, a lot more than it would seem. Shields of Loyalty, I don't think has relevancy, nor does it really interest me. And it's still in early access since 2021. I'm going to take that off the fall list. Sherlock Holmes Chapter 1 is rated positive, so I'll put that on the wish list. I think I have quite a bit of the Sherlock Holmes games. Nope. Just have the Devil's Daughter. But there are... Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I want to support Frogwares, but before I made that decision, I did buy a lot of their older generation Sherlock Holmes games and haven't gotten around to playing any of them. Which that could be me in a nutshell, and most gamers on Steam in a nutshell. This is a shame that this is mixed, because I would love to see a game like this. Maybe in VR, maybe not in VR though, but also in VR. If we could do it both ways, that'd be great. Just a Hogan's Alley for a modern generation. But it's mixed reviewed, so it must play pretty terribly. And then Shenmue 3, I'm not really sure I want to play any of the Shenmue series, but it meets the requirements, so I'll put it on the wish list anyways. In particular, I feel like the Shenmue series will probably do itself in fairly quickly. Shelter Manager is mostly positive. For $15 it might be too expensive, but maybe I'd get it on sale. In a lot of ways it is just an expanded clone of Fallout Shelter, which in all fairness, if this doesn't have microtransactions in it, which it doesn't seem like it does, it's inherently a better version than Fallout Shelter. She Will Punish, on the other hand, is adult only, and I better stop showing that. This game is rated very positively, but I don't know if there really is an actual game. It's still in early access from 2020. Very possibly will never come out of early access. It says it's HD remastered. The actual gameplay seems to be kind of generic. You're in an area and you're hacking and slashing monsters. But that may be a good enough mechanic if that is just the grinding gameplay mechanic to lead towards the dress up costume elements. In a lot of ways, it actually looks like it's heavily inspired by Diablo. And she will punish them. Yeah, I guess if it came out of early access at some point, I'd be willing to play an adult Diablo game. I don't know how I'd show it, certainly. And in particular, if Diablo comes to Steam, then it's a different consideration. It would make a lot more sense to play the real Diablo instead of an adult game that's inspired by Diablo. But when that game came out, there was no thought that Microsoft was going to acquire them, or anybody was going to acquire Activision Blizzard, and that Diablo game or Blizzard games might end up on Steam instead of Battle.net. And arguably, there's still a high chance that nobody will care about the original Diablo games or anything made from Blizzard, because they've just dropped the ball so much, and so then an adult spoof of it may be a counter production to consider. Sinoroid Forsaken here looks really bad. Is this on the fall list? No. This is just another game that came out and I had left over from Friday, so we can dismiss that. Here we have a Japanese only, Chinese only game. Looks like a city management game. Here we have Roast Together, which is, I think, Korean barbecue. Or different kinds of barbecuing. Does not support English, unfortunately. It only supports Chinese. I guess maybe this is Chinese barbecuing. This probably is not too different from a standard like cook, serve, delicious type game where you're just having to follow the ingredients. So it's probably a little too simplistic. The YouTuber MXR, I have not heard anything about his channel being unstolen or anything really from that happening at all. I would have expected it to be back, and maybe I just missed the message that they recovered it, but yeah. The fact that somebody, a pretty big YouTuber, can get their channels stolen probably indicates that YouTube should force higher levels of two-factor authentication and security on fairly large YouTubers, and enforce higher levels of scrutiny on password recoveries and such for those channels. It kind of doesn't even really matter if MXR's channel does come back, because I think they were still sitting on like a 30 or 90 day ban, and I don't think that they were gonna really try to make any content for a while anyways, which is a shame. I really enjoyed him pushing the limits of what was YouTube family friendly, or what YouTube would let him get away with, although at a certain point he was pushing it pretty hard. And we still don't really have a service out there to stream adult content, as far as I know, not one that people really would embrace. Here we have a game on Steam called Ink World, which just looks like a platforming hack and slash game of no interest. Here we have the Trying Combat Challenge, which looks bad. Here we have an infinite runner, I bet, called Panda Run. That looks bad. We have a game called Crazy Zoo, which is a match 3 game of no interest. Here we have a what looks like Korean only visual novel with some like pictocross going in. It's free, it's Korean only. I was listening to some Destiny Child soundtracks on YouTube. They put the first soundtracks of all their songs, and some of the songs have singers singing, which I would have assumed was in Korean, but then the subtitles were in Japanese symbols, so maybe they were singing in Japanese, which is weird, but not super weird. This game, Night Out, doesn't look like anything of interest. It's pretty easy to tell the difference between Korean symbols and Japanese symbols. Korean symbols tend to be less curvy. Interesting, there's a whole fighting game here. Aces Under the Moonlight. I think that deserves a follow. Yeah. It is weird how there are an occasional fighting games out there that just come out of the blue and are made by a different company. This is like that game, I forget the name of it, where there's a ball here that you're bouncing back and forth as part of the scoring mechanic instead of just beating up people alone, although it seems like you can do both. It has a weird animation style to it, I would say, where they kind of phase out when they're getting hit and it doesn't feel like it makes direct contact. Here we have a game called 10 Rooms, 10 Seconds, which makes me suspect that there literally are only 10 rooms in this game. Visually, it doesn't look that interesting. I don't know why sitting in the chair to stream is hurting my behind more than sitting on the chair to record Ni no Kuni, which I haven't had that problem up until this point. Maybe it's because in Ni no Kuni I don't care enough, and so I just lean back a lot more and relax instead of leaning forward into the mic when I stream. That is a possibility. We have a game called Cave, which looks like it might be a Myst-like puzzle game, and for that reason alone I'll give it a follow. I have noticed, though, getting back to playing games, my hands almost immediately started hurting. So even taking a couple of weeks of vacation is not going to cure arthritis. I wish there was a cure for arthritis, but I think it's just a degenerative disease that's going to get worse and worse. This game, Cloud Island, doesn't look interesting. Here we have conquest areas. Looks like it has a little bit more visual polish to it. It's being labeled as a real-time strategy shooter, first-person shooter. It definitely feels asset flippy though, and just not something that would catch my attention. We have another Pixel Games. This time Donut Dodo, which definitely does look like an old arcade game. And like I said, I just don't imagine that there's a scenario where I would want to play something like this. And that's saying a lot because this is effectively a Popeye / Donkey Kong game. Or clone. So there should be something more to this that would attract, and it still really doesn't. Next we have a game called Escape Abstraction. Which feels like it might be a puzzle game. So I'll give it a follow. And we have another adult game, so let me make sure all the content is YouTube family friendly. It says, what if your girl was a frog? And I wonder if the frog suit is the part that's being added here. It's tagged with sexual content for 84 cents. Does have an 18 plus patch. Says it has full nudity and sexual content. Like, more than likely, you would tend to assume the part that's being added and drawn on is the middle part here, and that the frog suit gimmick always did exist. As far as what the actual game is, it is just a puzzle game, so really can't make it to the fall list. But oddly, June 3rd, we did see adult games. So that resets the clock. Will we see by, say, June 10th or June 17th more adult games? Or will it be completely dry until a point after that? If we see it on June 10th, then we know they're holding back until a Friday. Again, if we see something before June 10th, then we know they aren't doing that anymore as much. Although it definitely feels like they're doing it again. Like, we went through all of last week and I didn't see a single anime game really of note, let alone an adult game. This game, Hell Division, I don't think is quite what I would want to play. I can't imagine wanting to control a drone to just like shoot at other drones. It is kind of a nice asset flip of the background and the environment. That I could see this being a gameplay mechanic in something else. If Cyberpunk 2077, for instance, had drone sequences where you control the drone and you were flying around in the sky, or you were flying around in narrow areas, that would have been potentially interesting for a few minutes. Then going back to the main gameplay mechanics in Cyberpunk. Here we have a game called Boom, which just looks like it's a jump platforming game of no interest. Here we have what looks like a RPG Maker style game called Cursed Town. Here we have a game called Drunk Games, which looks like a top-down twin-stick shooter game. Yeah, I don't think running around shooting people while drunk is something that would be encouraged. Look at that. We're going to end on a loss of being demoted, even. So we went up and we went down. And everything decided to reset, so now here's all your login bonus. And no Duel Live. And more stuff for Wednesday. Here we have a game called Voidwalkers, the Gates of Hell, which doesn't look visually polished enough. And then last game from Friday that I didn't get around to looking at was Midnight Renegade Recollections, which also does not look visually polished as much as it should, which that is a recurring complaint I'm certainly having, is that a significant number of games are not up to snuff for as far as the visuals. Which maybe Steam should be a little bit more picky about what games it allows, just on whether the visuals look good or look at least AA quality. Although that would exclude a lot of games, some of which are actually good. Oh, speaking of Valve and Steam, they put out a video update as far as the Steam Deck, as far as how they've improved software features and such, just a couple days ago, and there was basically no fanfare to it at all. I definitely would stick with my theory that if Valve wants the Steam Deck to succeed, they need it on shelves this Christmas, this Black Friday. Or at least they need a IOU equivalent on shelves this Black Friday. And that would be hard to do with the part shortage and all, but like their initial launch, which is really more of a beta launch, failed to maintain enthusiasm. And yeah, I definitely am not leaning towards thinking I would ever buy a Steam Deck. They could change my mind, certainly, if it came out with a slightly more powerful version and explained to me how a lot of games are going to be playable on it. A lot more games are going to be playable on it. Moving on, we have 3 GameDeveloper.com articles. Marvel's Spider-Man series has passed 33 million sold. It'll be interesting to see when they come to Steam and PC if that number jumps up to 66 or if it is just a slow climb and it barely gets to like 30, 35, 38. PlayStech has acquired the mobile studio Magic Field Games, according to GameDeveloper.com. And then the Apple Arcade leadership team was hit with 2 departures. The game's creative director Mark Bozon and the executive producer Kathy Astromoff have moved on, which I think that is just more examples of Apple Arcade not succeeding, Google Stadia not succeeding. There's kind of a long list. Let's see. I am going to go through my Twitter feed and look at the new news. Apparently Resident Evil Village is coming to Macintosh, which I suppose that'll be an interesting experiment with the current iOS operating system not really being designed for gaming, and Apple not really caring about gaming on their MacBooks and Macintosh equipment. That it'll be very interesting if that somehow works. I wouldn't also be surprised though if it kind of runs incredibly poorly and is just an example of why people don't port games to Macintosh. Dying Light 2 tweeted out something, although doesn't seem like it really, it's just Dying Light 2 fan art, which I can show it, but doesn't really show much. Dying Light 2 as a game has pretty much disappeared. from the general mindset. People are not thinking about it or talking about it. Apparently, Bin Studios is revealing a new logo tomorrow. I don't even know who Bin Studios is. Netflix has published a new Resident Evil trailer ahead of the show's July release. The apparently Sandman series is coming out August 5th, if I'm reading that right, on Netflix. It'll be very interesting to see if Sandman in live action can really pull things off. Although, in fairness, I will say, or I will condemn Netflix for not seeming to stick very closely to other comic book art styles or concepts. Particularly Lock and Key was fairly successful, but I don't feel like the art style of Lock and Key looks anything like the live action Lock and Key, and I don't know if the story is anywhere close to the story that occurs in the Lock and Key comic book. Although it kind of doesn't matter if you go a different direction with Lock and Key. It really matters if you go off the rails with the Sandman series. People are expecting something very specific there, and even slight changes. Apparently iMessage will get an edit button before Twitter and an undo send button. I guess that's just throwing shade. There is a section in the Sandman series that is a little fillerish, but I could see you cut that part out. But I could also see just leaving everything exactly as it is, word for word, if you can. And there is some hints that is what they're doing, because the screenshot that they put there showing Dream here, yeah, this is the beginning of Sandman, is that he has this weird like gas mask over his face, and I don't recall if there was even an explanation as far as the gas mask or not, but it was very like weird and didn't really play a role in the story, so I could see it being removed as a prop. When I read the Sandman series, I never had an internal voice. I tend not to give characters internal voices, so when I look at this actor, I could see him having a very different voice from what I would expect for Dream. That would be this character's Dream, the main character. If anything, I would just assume that Dream would have a low booming voice. Low booming, powerful would be what I would assume. But if he comes off as sarcastic or aloof, that would feel weird. We do have two GameDeveloper.com articles here. Keyword Studios contractors at BioWare have successfully unionized. The final unionization vote was 16-0, a shutout for unionizing contract developers. once again, this is a great example of very few people voting to unionize, and the tyranny of the voting minority that you can sometimes have in these votes. But it's probably for the better for the contractors. I saw a thing on the Reddit anti-work feed, which is making the front page of Reddit like crazy. Also, apparently Reddit is showing a ton of auto-playing video ads now. Apparently my ad blocker is blocking them though, so I'm not seeing them yet. But somebody was making that one-sided shower argument type post where they were saying why bother to unionize a bad job when you could just get a better job, quit and find a better job, which is an insane argument that I'm sure not too many people actually make, because you can't easily quit and get a better job. You can quit and look for a different job, but you have no idea if that other job you take is going to be better. They don't lay out all the problems of a job during the hiring process, or at least they usually don't. Anyways, the one counter argument to this fake shower argument was you are getting a better job when you unionize, and you're keeping it, which is definitely an interesting way to look at it, to say you're actually improving your job if you unionize, and if the union actually does improve the job, of course. Which, yeah, I can see that being true. An interesting way to look at things. Unionizing because you like your job, unionizing because you want to keep your job, unionizing because you want to make it better, not just abandon it and roll the dice somewhere else. Anyways, the other GameDeveloper.com article is Annapurna Interactive now has an internal development studio, which is interesting because I feel like the Annapurna Interactive is the makers of that anthology horror series, and they were already making a lot of those. Unless I'm thinking of Scrolling down here, it says Annapurna Interactive, sorry I went quiet there, efforts to build an internal game development studio won't likely impact its publishing efforts, which has turned out pretty well for the company and its partners alike, but does now mean that it will be able to produce games in-house and keep a close eye on the talent. The publisher's loose hands in managing key creative partners has been a footnote in revelations about alleged abuse at studios like Fulbright, Phenomena, and Mountains. Revelations about Fulbright's co-founder Steve Gaynor led to the publisher stepping in and acting as a mediator between Gaynor and those who employed. And I'd have to go back to even remember what the allegations were in that case. There's been so many companies that have had allegations. I do know that they eventually was a splinter group that made a company called Dimbulb, I believe, directly countering Fulbright. But Dimbulb is a way worse name. Key complaint in allegations against Mountains founder Ken Wong and Phenomena co-founder Robin Heineck was that Annapurna had reportedly been notified of the allegations of both creative leads but did not intervene. Which, yeah. Although I still didn't, in this article, get a list of games made by Annapurna. And that would have been the useful information for them to tell me. Let's see. I guess this is technically news. I don't want to delve too deep into these slacktivism. Let's pretend that we have gay pride posts, but at least I can point out here in this case that Gearbox did seem to be willing to actually go out in March with the gay pride parade, which I'm not sure what marching aims to accomplish each year, particularly if you're just having like a pride parade. Like, what is the goal there? It's not to normalize the gay lifestyle, because normal non-gay people don't march and have pride parades. It's not to bring awareness. It's probably not encouraging tolerance in people who are intolerant in any way. At a certain point, instead of, you should be proud of yourself individually every day instead of having a march. Yeah, I think the LGBT community, if they can get together and actually work together, which I don't know how much they actually do that, should establish specific goals each year. If it was fundraising even, that would make sense. Instead of just having a march. But as far as Gearbox, they did seem like they actually went to the march. They've taken pictures of themselves. They put pictures of themselves and their employees on their Twitter. That's way more than most video game websites who just put a rainbow flag on their logo, or on their Twitter logo. Alright, we are almost exactly at 3 hours into the stream. I'm not so incredibly sleepy that I'm about to fall asleep, so this did tend to work out better. That's going to be it for this stream, though. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can support me by friending me on Steam and gifting me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.